Welcome to my chronic migraine life. Today we're going to take a detour from talking about physical health and really explore more about emotional mindfulness, strength, health, and how it all plays into our daily lives, especially when you're dealing with a chronic illness. Today is one of my oldest and best friend's birthdays. I'm not going to say her name here. I try to keep everybody else's anonymity except mine for these purposes. But she's somebody that's more than just a friend to me, more than just a lifelong friend to me. She's really been a teacher to me in many ways, a spiritual advisor, maybe without knowing it, maybe without even trying. And I don't mean that in like the trendy, cliche kind of way. I mean in every true sense of herself and her soul and her daily life. I met my friend, I will call her Meredith, the very first night of college. My college, my freshman year, you had to go a few days earlier, I don't remember how many, for what they called freshman orientation. And it was just freshmen on campus. I lived at school, even though I was about 45 minutes from my house. It was something I always really wanted to do since I saw my older cousin visited her in Pennsylvania, wherever she went to school. I don't remember the school. Maybe York. That's Pennsylvania. And I saw what it was like for those 10 minutes I was visiting her in the actual campus without going outside. What it felt like, the camaraderie in the hallways and, people writing on each other's dry erase boards. And it was enough to fill my preteen mind with these grand ideas that I had to live where I went to school. And though I struggled a great deal in the beginning of that journey, I wouldn't have changed a thing. It was one of the happiest, most transformational periods of my life in the best way possible. And I feel like I got a great education, and really just living on your own for the first time teaches you things about yourself that I don't think you can really learn in your home environment, especially at that age. I was 17 because my birthday's in December, but 18, that whole period, it's when you really learn that your family is really who you choose for yourself, that your friends can be your family, that you can choose the people that are going to really fill your soul when times are low and when times are high. It's just such an important age and experience, and I treasure it. Anyway, the first night of that freshman orientation, we went on a cruise of New York City. I went to school on Long Island, and we, I guess, took a bus ride in and took a cruise around the harbor. That day had been very challenging for me. I was doing something that I was petrified of. No matter how much I wanted it, I was terrified. I had spent time away from home visiting friends and doing all that kinds of stuff, but never really being on my own, and I didn't know a soul, and I was terrified. My roommate was an upperclassman. They had just matched us or whatever, so she wasn't living there when I first moved in. And so all of that was just very trepidatious. Anyway, on this cruise, through a friend I had already made earlier that day, I found my friend Meredith. Along with her roommate, we sort of became this core four that moved through my years and really were the people I spent the most time around. Meredith was a theater major, of which I am not. And so I spent a lot of time with their friends and they're engulfed in their world. But think about it, I graduated in 2003, which was 17 years ago, and I can almost throw up right now thinking about that. That's almost somebody old enough to go, if I had a child that day, that person would be ready to go to college soon. That makes me sick. But in the last 17 years, we've come so far from those young girls that we met that day, that were carefree and just out to have a good time, to drink no less, to party, to have fun. But it was a much more deep relationship then, but ultimately now I feel like she's my left arm. To cut it off would be insane. Anyway, the reason I'm sharing this today on her birthday is not just because she's a great friend and we have a long history and she knows me better than I know myself most of the time. It's because she had her own chronic illness journey, and it was much more severe than mine and much more severe than anyone else I know. But it's not just the pain and the strife and the struggle that changed both of our lives. The reason I'm sharing it here is because the lessons I learned, I believe, and trying to, in some small way, comfort her and be there for her during her darkest time, really put the foundation for everything that I know how to be and who I am right now. In 2007, we were 26, got an email from a mutual friend of ours, and it pretty much said that Meredith had cancer. It was serious. She was in the hospital having chemo. Actually, I believe what it said was that she was in a medically induced coma at that time. Meredith had, the term always eludes me. I can't think of the term right now, and I had practiced before this. Cancer, essentially here at the base, stomach, esophagus, and it was really serious. It's not actually about the cancer, and I'm not here to give anybody medical information, but when you don't feel something right in your body, you're sick, you're in pain, you're losing a lot of weight, no matter what the ultimate diagnosis is, you always have to go to the doctor. You have to fight for your health and fight for a diagnosis and fight for treatment ultimately. And at that time, she was told lots of different things for lots of different periods and was diagnosed almost too late. The day she went into the doctor's office to get the actual diagnosis from somebody that knew what they were talking about, they couldn't believe she had driven herself there from work and that was sitting in front of him. He rushed her by ambulance to the hospital. What happened next is sort of a blur to me, and I know it's a blur to her, but she had some of the strongest treatment, the strongest chemo that they give. I want to say that she said there was platinum in it. Don't quote me on that. But it was sort of like a blow to the gut for me. Meredith lives in Connecticut, and so it's not very close to my house. At that time, she lived even further into Connecticut, and so it was very far from my house. And for me, I guess just by watching the way my family interacts with each other when the chips are down, you gravitate, you want to do something, you want to be there. I needed to be there and get to her, and I couldn't because you weren't allowed to see her, and she was being sedated and pumped full of all these drugs and sick as a dog, and who wants to see somebody when you're sick as a dog? But the thought that her life was in jeopardy was just sort of mind-blowing. And 26 sounds old, but you really don't ever think of your friends, your peers, being people that can get sick and die. That it could happen to you. Or certainly didn't occur to me. I mean, the first time I ever learned, if you want to say that, or could see proof of it, everything logically can happen to anybody at any time, but you don't live your life believing that. Because if you do, probably most of us wouldn't get out of bed. When I was 14, a classmate of mine got killed by a drunk driver in my neighborhood. And it plagued my community. Many different high schools, many different fields. Brooklyn is not a small town. And it affected thousands upon thousands of lives. And it was crushingly devastating to me. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. And not because at that point of his death was I particularly close to this person, but we had gone to elementary school together, we knew all the same family and friends, and to go to a funeral of somebody your age and to see the magnitude of the devastation of what that did, how it rippled through the community, was really, really powerful. That's the first time I really learned or appreciated that, every death affects so many other people and that it can happen to you. But when Meredith got sick, it was much closer to home and much more serious and much more terrifying. I couldn't wrap my head around what she would have to do to survive. She had numerous procedures, countless surgeries, one of which removed most of her esophagus and placed her stomach up near her heart. The tumor was aggressive, to say the least, and God knows how long it had been there, maybe 10 years, maybe less. People, the doctors, the professionals that she saw, never saw someone young with this cancer, and so they didn't really exactly know how to treat it long term. And that year, which now that I think about it, she was only an aggressive, terrible therapy in and out of the hospital for a year, but the effects have been lasting, and it felt like a really long year. I needed to do something. I needed to be a part of it. And her parents were at the hospital, and so I couldn't really get a hold of them. And now this is 2007, but, you know, I had a cell phone, but it wasn't the way that social media and personal connections were really made, you know? I couldn't really get any other information. Nobody else knew anything because we couldn't speak to our parents. And as soon as I heard that and couldn't get in touch with them, I felt plagued with sickness. So I did what I would do, or I thought I had to do something. And she always credits me with being a strength for her, but really it was selfishness. I needed to do something. I needed to put myself someplace else to feel like I was contributing in some way to putting a smile on her face. So that year was a big year for me. I was the second year of a new job. I was going on a lot of vacations. I was experiencing some personal freedom, but I felt guilty every time I did. So every time I went away, I'd send her a postcard and write, wish I was there instead of wish you were here, because that's all I really wanted to do was to be with her. I guess I found out at the beginning of the year. I don't really know. And all I know is that by the summer, I was just terrified I was never going to see her again. We hadn't physically seen each other in a couple of years, and our communication had been on and off as, you know, life sort of changes and things happen. And the fear that I wouldn't get to see her again just welled inside of me. It does still now when I think about it. And I just didn't know what to do. So initially I started sending like cards. Every time somebody stressed me out at work or I was on a lunch break, I would go to a card store. And I'm old-fashioned. I like mail even still today, but I would mail cards and presents and anything I could think of, just something. And I hadn't heard back from anybody in her household for a while, and I finally got a hold of her mother one night. And I remember this where I was sitting in my house when I spoke to her, and she told me that, Donna, thank you so much. You know, she gave me the update, but Meredith isn't, I guess she was home at the time, isn't up to even reading mail. She can't open anything. She can't stay awake long enough. She's too sick. Another sucker punch to the gut. I didn't understand what that meant. I've seen people in my life with sicknesses, with diabetes, with, you know, having a heart surgery at that point here and there, but you're not strong enough to even listen to somebody open my card for you. I just floored and devastated for them, and there was nothing I could do. Through that year, I eventually got to see her, I believe. No, I know for a fact. It was December of that year, December of 2007. It was right before one of her very final and big, well, not final, but biggest surgeries, I'll say that. And neuroendocrine, that's the kind of cancer. It just came to me. And I went up to Connecticut. I met this mutual friend that had told me about it initially, who was also my former college roommate after that first year. And drove up this winding driveway to the mountaintop, sort of, and went to visit her. And I was so excited, and I couldn't wait. And when I was pulling my car in her driveway, I got a glimpse of her from the door she was standing at. And it took my breath away. I'm so glad she wasn't standing beside me, because what she looked like took my breath away. And I'm sorry if she's hearing this for the first time now, but I was just out of love. She was always a thin girl, and she was emaciated and bald from the chemo. No eyebrows, no eyelashes, and I think that's the thing that that's more disturbing than not having the hair is what it does to your face, depending on the cocktail, as it's called, in your chemo bag. If there's steroids, sometimes you get that like Buddha belly, even though you're not eating, the sunken eyes, that's what makes you look sick. Well, because the drug's ultimately trying to kill everything inside of you, to kill the bad stuff, so that, God willing, that the good stuff can regrow and regenerate. And to see her like that, even briefly, as I was trying to pay attention to parking, I had to get a hold of myself. I didn't want to react. I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable or judged, or, the things that are the most important in this world, of course, are not the vain things, but they're parts of the things that make us who we are. The clothes, even if we don't care about name brands, the hair, even though I'm not styling mine, it's the parts of making you you. And to have that taken away on top of everything else is devastating. I remember getting text messages from her while she was shaving her head. She was wearing one of the shirts that I had bought her. And that, though it was a sad day, she was feeling strong and inspired because she was wearing my shirt. Small things just don't matter. They just don't matter. And that day, ultimately, once I was able to hug her and see her, it was a wonderful day. And what she looked like didn't matter anymore, and I got used to it, and it was just us again. The night before this big surgery was one of the hardest of my life. We spent a lot of time on the phone. She was going to bed early because, as most big surgeries, they make you go to the hospital at like 5 o'clock in the morning or something crazy. And we were saying our goodbyes, really. Ironically, I had an aunt visiting, and we were going out to dinner that night, and everybody was downstairs in my house, and I was upstairs in my bedroom on the phone with my friend, and she was reading me her will and telling me what her wishes would be for her funeral, and to please check on her family. If anything should happen. Of course, I agreed to everything, and I was somehow calm, I believe, through the conversation, and I told her if she couldn't sleep to call me or any of those things, and it was a very serious surgery. They didn't know if she would survive it, what it would be like afterwards. And of all things, I had jury duty the next day. I was supposed to bring a phone and all that bullshit. And I knew I'd be waiting to hear from her mom to see what happened. But Meredith was very upbeat. Classic Meredith. She almost never complains. So if she's telling you she's in pain or sick, something is like off the scale, it would have killed you or I, hands down. But that does something to you. It changes you. At 26, I was 25 at the time, to think of what your life would be like to have to say goodbye to somebody. People die suddenly all the time or get sick, and you always want that chance to say goodbye. But what would that look like if you were saying goodbye? I don't even know what it is that I said to her. I'm sure I tried to be positive, and she was very positive, and I just wanted to never get off the phone. But I did. And that next morning, as I sat in jury duty, I did something that Meredith only taught me, and it's something I still do to this day. She very much believes, present tense, very important to stop here and acknowledge that I am not talking to somebody that passed away. She is in remission 12 years, and she's the strongest person I know, and that's why she gets this video dedicated to her on her birthday, and why that's the title of this video. But in the hours between I had gotten off the phone with her and actually heard from her mother, a lot of time had passed. And I remember sitting in that big room before they call you individually for cases in jury duty and just doing what I knew she taught me to send her love and light, something I still do all the time when I'm thinking of people, and praying. Everybody's different when it comes to religion and spirituality, but I just felt if I closed my eyes and concentrated as hard as I could from my gut, sending her positive thoughts, and you've got this and you're doing it, and I haven't heard anything yet, so that means you're still in surgery, which is good. because if things go awry, you hear faster. And just with all of my being, deep, deep down, just praying, please, please, please pull through. I need you. And it was selfish, but I needed you. I still do. When I got out of jury duty that day, my phone was ringing before I went on the subway to come home, and it said my friend's name on my phone, and it took my breath away. And logically, of course, it was her mother calling me. But I heard the news. She made it through. She was in ICU, which was standard, and she would call me, of course, when she can. It's also when I learned this sort of way of dealing with, people, and people I tried to teach them when it came to me. I will contact you when I am able to. But even though you're not able to answer a phone or see your phone at that moment, when you go back, it's nice to see all these messages that people have checked in and said, hey, I'm thinking of you, love you. When you get a chance, no matter day or time, you'll get back to me. But not to wait for the sick person to get back to you, for you to keep sending positive thoughts in any way that means. If it means cards, if it means text messages, if it means email stalking her parents, even though they're not reading it at that moment. I believe in that energy. And Meredith taught me that because it's healing. That year, 2008, the beginning of 2008, January 4th, 2008, we received the news that she was officially in remission. She was about to get out of the hospital, I believe from that last surgery. I think it was kind of in Martin Luther King. I don't know why. Maybe I was home with my own migraine. I don't even know why I was home. It was a Monday. I remember that. And we were on the phone, and she called me as soon as the doctor left her room. I had seen her prior to this conversation. I didn't expect to see her or hear from her for weeks, but like a week later I got a phone call from her or a text message and said, can you come visit me? Visit you? Of course. I'll be there in a second. Well, it took like 3 hours, but I dropped everything and ran to her because I couldn't believe she was up for it. My friend is the strongest person I know. She had this major abdominal surgery and was sitting in the ICU bed with her knees curled to her, just chilling, lounging, looking like she was just hanging out in somebody else's waiting room, hospital room, and it was incredible. When I went to visit her later on, I can't bring things into the ICU, germs, flowers, but when I went to visit her later on in the hospital, I went to Liberty Travel back in the day and raked their shelves of every travel magazine, of every destination, and brought them to her and said, as soon as you're well enough, it's your choice. Wherever you go, I will go. We're celebrating. Vacations are a great way to celebrate life. And she picked the Turks and Caicos, as she calls it. And later that year, April 20, 2008, we would go. But when I was on the phone with her and crying, and she was crying that she was in remission, I thought, thank God, when you're in your darkest times, you never see the light. You can't imagine what it will feel like. And it feels better than anything that you can ever dream up, right? And nothing else matters. And I don't even know. But there's another thing I learned through Meredith and her sickness is that I wasn't going to take it for granted, When people die, no matter the circumstances, we always have that wish, regret, could have said, would have did this different, would have made another phone call, would have said them, would have, we honor the death date and sort of, it's been 15 years since my grandmother died or whoever, and I wanted to celebrate the day that I got the news that it wasn't going to be that way for her, and never forget it, never take it for granted, because I very sentimental, and I feel like if we forget the big things, then it's very easy to get absorbed in all of the little things. And so, to this day, I send her a card or a present or definitely a message to celebrate it. And future cancer survivors in my life, or even with my mother's open heart surgery, this past October was the first year anniversary of my mother's surgery, and we celebrated it. Because there is never enough days to celebrate life. There just really never is. And even if you have to mark what was a trying time, if it ultimately ended in victory, I feel like those days are worth celebrating. They're a bonus birthday. And who doesn't need to be loved hard an extra day of their life? The answer is no one. The things I did to try to help her, let her know that I was thinking of her, even when I couldn't speak to her and even when I couldn't see her, was the care packages. And, if somebody's going to the hospital for an extended period of time, you want them to feel as comfortable in his home as they could be. I got, pillows and blankets. And once they're in a regular room, the things that they're allowed are just more things they're allowed. And so, excuse me, I have to shut my phone off. And so I would send her anything. She used to love candy necklaces. I sent her a whole bunch from this old school 100-year-old candy store in Coney Island. I mean, these enormous care packages. She couldn't eat the candy, but she could wear it and smile and think of us in old times. Sentimental things, funny things. The dirtiest, funniest, stupidest cards you could find, that's what I sent. There was one giant one, and I remember it because it was one of those giant cards, and my mother said it was insensitive to send to her, but I knew she would get it, and she surely did. It said, if you were a horse, they would have shot you by now. It's funny. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, and she certainly was. The point of this whole story, and I'm leaving out so very many details, is that Meredith, her cancer journey, did something deep into me, and that struggle, I felt like I was right there with her every day, even though I'm not trying to lessen what she went through, because she was doing the hard work. And unfortunately, she has a lot of ramifications from the treatments that she went through, and isn't necessarily living the life that she wants. And that breaks my heart. But still, not a complainer. Still will listen to me rant and complain about the things I complain about for many years. But she taught me many things. To not take life for granted. That love and light and good intentions are everything. That you have to mentally be willing. That is 99.9% of it all. You need the doctors, you need the medicine, you need whatever. But mental capacity is everything. You have to want it. You have to see yourself through it. There is no other way. And that's what I used to try to prep my mom up before her surgery, for myself too. And you have to see yourself better. You have to see it over. You have to see yourself surviving. Because if you can't picture it, no one else can picture it for you. And she's much more eloquent than I am and always says things better. I call her my little Buddha. But it's true. It's really true. December 27th, 2007, God. Can you see? I got a tattoo. The C is for her actual name. The cross-like figure is a symbol of strength and perseverance. I got it before I knew she would survive, and that has no bearing to why I got the tattoo. I needed something I could touch. When I needed strength, I thought of the strongest person I knew. When I needed to feel close to her, I touched the tattoo. When I just needed to be reminded, as so many of us do, that each moment we get together is a blessing, I touch it. And so, and not a day goes by that I think of her, even if we don't speak every day. The same rules apply. The love and strength in life is always there. What I didn't know at that time is that what this foundation of what true compassion looks like, and true understanding, and going to the ends of the earth and back with someone, to really go to hell and back, to know what that really looks like. And I've had a lot of serious days in my life, but in some ways, what I went through emotionally, even on the days I wasn't speaking to her, was a lot harder than the physical stuff I went through. It's different. You never want the one that you love to be suffering. You want to take on that pain and give them a day off. Sadly, it doesn't work that way, but that's how it should be. And sorry, my phone would not shut off. I think of it all the time. It took me a long time to process the trauma of what that felt like emotionally. That year was a really hard year. But it laid the foundation for my sickness, to know what it really meant to be strong and persevere through something. I'm not going to say that in my darkest days of pain, curled up in a bed, I was thinking of my friend and what she went through and that I could survive this if she survived that. I can't say any of those things. What I did think was, if I'm in this much pain and I don't think I'm going to make it, how the fuck does anybody with a more serious illness deal with that kind of pain? How did my friend deal with her pain? How do other people deal with pain like this? How the fuck are they alive? Sheer will. And God's mercy, I suppose. The story has a happy ending. We went to the Turks and Caicos in April 2008. The picture you see at the beginning of this video is us toasting on that trip to life. We're drinking mojitos. And we were celebrating the fact that she was alive. And that we were together. To be blessed and grateful is an understatement. I just never, ever take it for granted. And, you know, I always think what she would do or what she would say, or when I'm feeling heavy about something and I speak to her, all goes away. The lesson is that there is nothing too big or small you can do for someone when they are struggling, whether it's from an illness, depression, financial, whatever it is. Whatever your person's problems are, there's nothing that you can't do to make their day a little bit brighter. You know, I used to text her quotes from the King of Queens and stupid things, and there's a countless list of things that you can do, but being there, knowing that when you're in your darkest moment, somebody else is thinking of you and praying for you and suffering alongside with you. Even not literally, but emotionally, that means everything. I would come to find that out later on. But the strength we have in ourselves to love and to be appreciative and to be compassionate is endless. And it's so important that when our people need us, we ride right along with them. To really know what it means to be a ride or die is everything. Even if they can't respond right away and you don't know what they're thinking, when they see it, they will think they are loved and thought of, and that there's a reason to fight so hard to live. You need to know that. You need to know that you're not just living because if I died, my mother would be devastated. It's not enough. It's not enough. And so those are just a tip of the iceberg of the things Meredith taught me. And so I wish her a very blessed year of good health and lots of love. And she will always have those wishes from me. And I can't wait to see her soon. But until then, I hope you take along some of her light and inspiration. And don't take the people in your life for granted. I surely never will again. Until next time, guys.